Morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Can you all hear me? Audio, video, okay? Good morning. Excellent. Good morning. Okay, so before I start, thank you for joining in. Um, I have uploaded all the ethics notes for all the lectures conducted so far. From now onwards, every time I will upload a lecture, I'll upload an ethics lecture by tomorrow. I will upload the note along with the lecture. Okay. So all the four lectures with the notes are already there on the Telegram channel. You can please download them. I hope you're finding the notes to be good. I have tried to make it as exam centric as possible. The idea behind the notes is not to give you any sort of gyan, is not to give you any kind of overwhelming knowledge. At the end of the day, ethics is about writing as widely as possible, as multidimensionally as possible, and that can only happen if you have a very wide range of examples to deal with. So I hope that's happening. I hope you're able to understand the idea behind the notes. I hope you're able to understand that if you're able to replicate at least this much in the exam, you are not walking away with anything less than 110 or 15 in GS paper 4, bare minimum. Do you understand the point behind this? And the notes are in a very similar pattern. You will see the similar nature of examples evolving around the notes. So it should be able to help you. Okay. Are we fine with this? Good. Now, after finishing a larger civil services theme, we now enter into core governance domain, because to my mind civil services is a topic which is partially with polity and partially with governance, whereas now that we move to something which is sort of similar to partially polity and partially governance, equally important for the pre, equally important for the means. Remember this. Civil services is irrelevant for the prelims exam, but anti-corruption as a larger framework, as a larger theme, is as important for the pre as it is important for the mains exam. Okay, so we are now going to study anti-corruption governance, which basically means how do we solve the anti-corruption problem in the country. Okay, Chandan, just give me some time, I'll get back to you. Okay, the larger issue of how do you solve anti-governance. Now, this is something which is equally important for the pre and the mains, is joint between paper 2 and paper 4, and also will have some degree of relevance in the essay paper. Now, fundamentally, we have to answer three basic questions. The first is a core theoretical aspect in terms of what is corruption, why does it happen, what are the different forms of it. Yes, so what is corruption? Let us say the meaning of it, the forms of it, and fundamentally how has corruption evolved, right? And then you move to the policy behind it, which is to fundamentally answer a simple question, which is how do you solve the corruption problem? How do you address the corruption problem? How do you try to remove, or how do you completely eliminate the corruption problem. Now, this would therefore require us to understand two simple aspects. One is, how do you identify or how do you investigate corruption? And second, how do you punish for corruption? Fundamentally, there are two aspects. How do you identify corruption and how do you punish for corruption? To identify and how do you punish for corruption, this would require us to understand two dimensions. One, what are the laws and what are the larger bodies governing corruption? Now, for example, well, let's say we are talking about identification. So, identification can be done by anyone. So, is there a one second? So, identification can be done by anyone. Identification could be, let us say, in a manner where anyone and everyone is helping you discover corruption. So, something which is omnipresent, for which, for example, RTI is a very important method. Second is the ombudsman method, where you have appointed an authority in the government to check corruption. Whether it is Lokpal or whether it is Lokayukt, these are basically authorities to check corruption. Whether it is a banking ombudsman under the RBI scheme, whether it is insurance ombudsman under IRDA, that's what you're basically doing, correct? And punishment of corruption is largely to be done by a court of law. Now, do we have special courts of law? Do we have, fast track courts? Do we have some special methods? Right? Good. Now, this corruption, as we understand it to be, is across the three branches of the state: the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. And here we look at both the elected executive and the permanent executive. Judicial corruption is the same thing as judicial accountability. Remember our lecture on judicial accountability? Judiciary and the RTI, judiciary and parliamentary removal, judiciary and in-house procedure, judiciary and the POSH committee. It is exactly the same thing. Good. So the larger stakeholder effectively comes into place here. It is the same framework that we're operating under. Good. And then you also look at the larger stakeholders. In the entire anti-corruption framework, who is the stakeholder? The person who is accused of corruption, the person who's able to identify or investigate, the person who's able to assist, the person who's able to prosecute or to punish, the government or the state at large, the citizens, industry, your development agencies, pressure groups, NGOs, etc. Yes or no? Correct? And international organizations. This also gives you a framework Simple as that. You can also, instead of international organizations, you can write international organizations here also and look at sector specific impacts like unemployment, health, education, environment, tribal affairs, women empowerment, children empowerment. So, for example, if there is a corruption problem in the Ayushman Bharat scheme, isn't the health sector overall getting affected? So, all your related stakeholders get affected because there is corruption in that sector. That is how corruption is an infested problem. Are you understanding? Yes or no? Are we clear on this? All social justice components. If you are able to do this, you already have your stakeholders ready for corruption case studies in your answers. Right? If there is a case study which says that there is a possibility of corruption where you are trying to, downgrade the status of tribal land as open land. So tribal welfare, environment, land protection, all of it goes for a toss. In addition to the existing stakeholders. So the sector effectively means the area where the corruption is happening. The department, the specific sector, scope, scheme of work where the corruption is happening. So that itself becomes an important problem to solve. Okay, good. So this is the larger framework. Now all you have to do is start putting in, fill in the blanks to all of this. So for example, people who assist are people who give evidences or people who help you identify. So whistleblowers, ombudsman here, Lokpal, Lokayukt. Then you would also have some dedicated agencies like CVC, CBI, all of those. Your laws will also have some general laws or some core laws and some special laws. Like Prevention of Money Laundering Act is a special anti-corruption law. Benami transactions is a special anti-corruption law. But IPC effectively is what? Is a general corruption law. And the subject of all of this is who is a public servant. Right? And also at the same time, you will have some bodies that you may not directly link to corruption, but are actually to be studied very carefully within the corruption domain. If you think about it, the CAG is a corruption identification mechanism. Is it not? The CAG is effectively a corruption identification mechanism. Yes or no? So your entire corruption policy, your entire anti-corruption network, you should be able to visualize and study it together in one go. Because you will be able to identify your answers in this format. So while these are your stakeholders, these are also your points of issues. These are effectively your points of issues. Are we being able to identify the right accused? Are we able to investigate well? Have they been given enough powers? Are we able to protect our whistleblowers or people who are assisting? And how are we processing evidence? Are our anti-corruption prosecutors, legal machinery, courts functioning sufficiently? How strongly is the government solving or imbibing a no tolerance culture? How actively are citizens fearlessly reporting corrupt activities? How resistant is the industry towards, the whole industry nexus, political nexus? Just 1 second, please. Sorry. So the stakeholders in corruption also happen to become your fundamental issues in the anti-corruption framework. Whether you apply it to governance or social justice or ethics or anything else, the larger ecosystem is the same. Yes or no? So electoral bonds, which is where the industry was paying politicians or political parties to have a favored policy, is also a form of corruption. So electoral bonds was a corruption enabling issue. You bring it up here. So NGOs playing favorites with the government, or governments playing favorites with NGOs, or NGOs running an agenda against the government, whichever few of them were, or NGOs being biased in their work, or NGOs not implementing the welfare work sanctioned to them by the government, is also a form of corruption, right? International organizations funding NGOs through an alternate route with some agenda in mind is also a form of corruption. SHGs and bank linkage, when self-help groups are supposed to get identified by banks so that the banks can give loans, and then there is a problem of corruption because the banks are not giving SHGs identification as such, and therefore they're not able to get financial access, is a form of corruption. So you solve these issues, you're also solving corruption. The idea is to be as efficient. The idea has to be as thorough as possible. Clear? So this is the framework. And as long as we're able to solve this framework, we will be able to solve most problems. So something as simple as the appointment to anti-corruption bodies is not unbiased. There is partiality, there is state intervention involved. It's simply a problem of, are we investigating properly or not? Break it down as simply as possible. And you need theory here, because once you understand the form and the sources, you have to attack corruption sociologically. Because corruption is a demand supply problem. Somebody is asking for it and somebody is giving it. People asking for bribes have to be stopped. And people giving bribes, even if they've not asked, or even if they've been asked, they also have to be stopped. We as citizens cannot have a chip on our shoulder saying, no, I need my jobs to be done sooner, I need my work to be done quicker, so I will get done with it immediately. right? So this is your anti-corruption framework. Whether you pick up a Lokpal or you pick up a CAG or you pick up an RTI or you pick up a CVC, then you do a PYQ analysis and you would be able to understand that that CBI has largely been a CBI general consent specific question with federalism. So are the states cooperating or not? So CBI and states cooperating is a general consent, special consent issue, right? So this is why topics like these have to be studied very holistically. A fundamental change that I have also brought in my teaching pedagogy from this year onwards, from MCF3, MCMA onwards. Otherwise, we would also go very pedantic. We would also be very, very, incremental. That we will do RTI separately, do CAG separately, but no. If you look at the kind of questions that GS paper 2 is asking, if they can do if is SHG an anti-poverty vaccine, and if they can link MG Narega, gender and unemployment together, then we have to play the same game. And last year in the prelims, there was a question on Lokpal, also a technical question on Lokpal. A question far too technical than necessary, but nonetheless. So, whether you're doing paper 2 or paper 4, this is largely how you do this. Now, when you look at it from a paper 4 point of view, you say that there are some effective values of public service. That is a component we add. And how it is important to instill those values, which is largely nothing but Nolan Committee and your ARCs combined. Empathy, compassion, commitment, integrity, impartiality, all of those values, basically those. Yes. Those are all instigating issues. Lokpal members getting, BMWs to Delhi High Court saying that Delhi High Court looking at a Lokayuk judgment which was prosecuting a judge saying that judges are not under the ambit of Lokpals or Lokayuks. All of these are larger issues. Corruption will always be a larger question or a very technical legal question. Corruption will never come from a specific instance. The question will never be on a specific instance. It will always be context. And the beauty with corruption answers is you will run out of space, but you will always have context. Introductions are perfectly sorted. You can define, you can give some contemporary example, right? You can give certain data and close your eyes and just look at Transparency International and it is all done. Historical evolution of corruption is not necessary at all. From an essay point of view, maybe, but not in GS2 or paper 4 as well. Right? You can easily write an introduction also. And conclusion would always be about what is at stake. The entire stability of the state is at stake. Clear? Are we okay with this? Yes or no? ठीक. So let's start with the theory. Now we understand the grasp of it, we understand the plus and the minus of it. Whether it is a law, whether it's a body, whether you're looking at it from any perspective, this is one way to go about it. 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 Clear? Abhinandan, just stop it. Okay? I know when to go ahead and when not to. Don't. All right? We're okay with this so far? Good. Let's go. Now, let us look at the larger theory of corruption. Now, when we're looking at the larger theory, what all do we have to answer? Again, sorry, Abhinandan, if I thought it was just a bad judgment call. Sorry again. So we look at the core concept. We will look at a very mild evolution of corruption. We will then look at what are the causes of corruption. Why does this happen? We would also look at the types of corruption and how it is important for this is common to paper 2 and paper 4. What are the consequences of corruption? MC4, please continue as it is. I mean, you're writing much later, right? Largely, this is the idea. Okay. So let us start. See, corruption by the nature of it, by the meaning of it, corruption एक बहुत ही ग्लोबल फिनोमेना है और ये मॉडर्न नहीं है. Corruption is a persistently existing sort of a phenomena in society as old as society is. In fact, ये कहना that corruption is as old as civilization or as old as the notion of the state also continues to be true. Now, what is the meaning of corruption? So, corruption as a global phenomena has persisted throughout history. It has taken many forms depending on what kind of society we are in. And in a very broad sense, in a very, very simple, broad sense, corruption involves using public power for private gain. This is your standard World Bank definition. Public power for private gain. Stick to the simple World Bank definition. Don't, it is one of the most beautiful definitions. In fact, it says the World Bank defines corruption as abuse of public office for private gain. Abuse of public office for private gain. Now, so what basically happens in corruption is that an entrusted authority, a designated authority, typically comprising of public officials, are doing something for personal enrichment, are doing something to benefit either themselves or somebody specific in an unfair manner. Okay? And corruption is not only monetary. It should not just be confined to financial transactions. Corruption would be a larger range of unethical activities. Favoritism is a form of corruption. Nepotism is a form of corruption. Manipulation of public resources is a form of corruption. In fact, if you look at the ethics note that I've released today, in public private ethics, I've given a separate page on conflict of interest. So, whether it is a conflict of interest, and if you are taking a wrong decision in conflict of interest, that is also corruption, right? Even if you are an income tax officer and a friend's investigation has come before you, you either recuse yourself, but you do not favor the friend. That's the larger idea. If you look at the evolution of corruption per se, right? Now, especially in India, corruption has deep historical roots. In fact, this is anecdotes you can use in introduction and essays if required. If you look at the Vedic text, whether especially Rig Veda, it very specifically warns against the consequences of corruption. If you look at Kautilya and if you refer to Arth Shastra, very common examples but very effective, which was written around the 4th century BC. Kautilya addresses the issue of corruption amongst government officials and prescribes some of the most stringent punishments ever. Globally, also, if you look at older, historic democracies like Greece, their empires were also infested with corruption. Now, the nature of corruption in the Vedic times, in the times where Arthashastra was written, or how corruption prevailed in the Greco-Roman empires, and how corruption is today. If I ask you, what is the difference? If corruption is so historic, what is the difference? The difference is corruption today is fundamentally systemic. Now, systemic here also means systematic. Basically, there is a system that keeps needing to be greased, even to get an ordinary job done, right? So, if I ask you a very simple question, why is the nature of corruption so fundamentally different today? The simplest answer to that question is because corruption is systemic today. And one of the reasons why corruption is so systemic today, and in fact, the most important reason, is British colonialism, which effectively started with the East India Company. In fact, if you look at most of the constitutional legal history, historical underpinnings, modern India, if you look at most of these acts, whether it is, remember, dual control, there was a board of control and all of that being set up, the Pitt's India Act, and then, slowly the company becoming far more diluted in their affairs, and then, them to just become a trading entity. They started as a trading entity, then they had administrative powers, and then they were stripped of their administrative powers. All of those things happened. Why? Because there were fundamental issues of East India Company officials establishing systems and structures of corruption which carried through the ages, right? And no doubt efforts were made. Salaries of officials were increased so that they are lesser dependent on bribes. Stringent measures were taken. Powers were largely taken away. So if you have lesser powers, then effectively you should have, lesser reasons to be corrupt, and all of those things happen. But 150 plus years of British rule in the country made the system so infested that post independence this continued to plague India. Clear? It continued. Simple as that. Now, let me ask you a simple question. If corruption was so institutionalized by the British, it should have been easy for us to remove it post independence. It should have been easy for us to eliminate it post independence, right? And is it fair to completely just blame the British if you look at it from a a really fair point of view? They are the ones most responsible. But inherent social inequality breeds corruption, if you think of it. If society is fundamentally divided, if society is fundamentally stratified, corruption will prevail. The larger the gap, go back to Marx and the thoughts, the larger the gap between haves and have nots, the more prevalent would be corruption in that country. You would generally see countries with relatively better development indicators, countries with lesser inequality, countries with lesser inequality, they would generally have lesser instances of corruption. Correct? So, this is one of the reasons why fundamentally corruption as a problem to solve is a very complex problem. Correct? Because the causes are so diverse. It is not like health or education or unemployment. And by the way, education and health are also very complex problems to solve, but they're positively complex problems to solve. Health is when you have to start fixing fundamental issues with health or education. But corruption, by the multidimensionality of it all, by how intersectional it is to so many other things, becomes a very difficult problem to solve. And then we started out with, we carried forward the British laws, the IPC, we carried it to BNS. Honestly, there's not a lot of difference when it comes to anti-corruption provisions in the IPC and BNS. We've had the Prevention of Corruption Act, which has been revised a few times. It started with 1947. We have a newer act and amendments have been made. But these have been the two main pillars of anti-corruption legislation. Everything else sort of flows from it. Right? Good. Now, if such is the case, we must also then understand what are the larger administrative causes, what are the larger causes of corruption. So, as I said, corruption in India is complex and it is a combination of multiple factors which end up, interplaying with one another. So, the first cause is the administrative reason. Okay. What are the administrative causes of corruption? If you have weak administrative structures, if you have weak administrative structures, there is a general lack of transparency. There is inadequate control mechanisms built into the systems. These factors will eventually foster an environment very conducive to corruption. So your administrative causes will largely look at three things. First, your structures are weak. Two, generally transparency is very diluted. And three, you will see control systems are also shaken. And when public officials have a wide discretion, but that discretion is not complemented with accountability, likelihood of corruption rises. Tomorrow, when you are the collector or in the secretary, as a secretary, whoever, wherever, you have the right to singularly decide a specific job has to be done by B specific entity. That entity could be anyone and everyone. It's effectively your discretion. And in a welfare democracy, in a socialist democracy, some form of discretion is necessary, at least on ground. But if that discretion is too far-fetched, then there is a problem. There are also social causes. So weak administrative setups would mean, for example, if there is no supervision, there is no watertight compartmentalization, there is no check on administrative functions. If an application has come to you on date X, why has it not been processed by date Y? And who's checking why this has not been processed? Is a weak structure, right, Nikhil? It should automatically be a flag, which is why digitization is a very strong anti-corruption vaccine. If you look at it from a social point of view, generally society is perceived to be less ethical than before. And at a fundamental level, people have for a long time been sort of tolerant to corrupt practices. I am not talking about instances reported on social media. I'm not talking about you know one-off instances that gain the eye of the media and all of those things. No doubt they are important. But tomorrow, if you had to go and get a rent agreement registered, let's say for that matter, and while getting that rent agreement registered, it would have taken you 1 week, and somebody standing outside the magistrate's office said, you know what, give me 500 bucks, I get it done in a day. If we are dead honest with each other, all of us will take that route. Yes. We are tolerant to corruption. Because if you think of it as a society, we have become very, very individualistic. We keep our houses clean, but our roads dirty. It is so phenomenally obnoxious to see the same people littering on the road who would want to keep their houses spick and span. There is an enabling problem. And there also seems to be a general lack of awareness in terms of exactly who's supposed to do what. Third, there are some psychological reasons. Corruption is often driven by personal greed, by a desire for power. This psychological disposition, this framework, this built-in idea that if I am in authority and if I am in power, combined with social pressures, will lead to corrupt practices. Why are you power hungry? Why is anybody power hungry? Why do you want to achieve a position of accomplishment? Yes, you want to solve problems for society and people, yes. But you also want to make life easy for yourself. Also want to make life easy for yourself. There are economic causes as well. If a constable gets less than 20,000 rupees a month to survive in a metro city, to be able to educate his or her children, to be able to fend for qualitative food, to live a decent life, public salaries are just not enough. It does not mean that you increase public salaries indiscriminately. But yes, there is a problem. That is the largest. So, Satvik, hold on. When you're paying to get appointed, that's also political. You're not paying the bureaucracy to get appointed. You're paying the political class to get appointed. Isn't that the case largely? Which then brings me to the political reasons, where we look at a word called kleptocracy. Now, political corruption, which is also called kleptocracy, is when there is an abuse of power by political leaders for personal gain. This is very pervasive in India. Kleptocracy, sure. Kleptocracy. Kleptocracy. Okay. So, therefore, one of the strongest instances of corruption in India is kleptocracy. Now, what happens very uniquely in India is what we were just talking of 5 seconds ago, where there is a politician bureaucracy nexus. 2025 has been, in fact, let us be honest with each other, 2024, 25 have been terrible years for Indian bureaucracy. Because right from the recruiting agency, which is the UPSC, the frequency and the number of cases that have come out with respect to the civil services, they have been more than normal, they have been more than usual. It does not mean that suddenly in the last 2 years, the civil services has become exceedingly corrupt. No. It means that there is greater visibility and now knowledge of civil services corruption at multiple levels. It was so shocking to read that an SDM level officer, SDM is your first posting after your training. As an SDM level officer, you are getting caught red-handed with cash in your house. It is shameful beyond a point. I know the quantum is irrelevant, but the quantum adds a lot of emphasis. The money was less than 30 lakhs. No, 30 lakhs is a big amount. No doubt. For most of us, 30 lakhs is an unthinkable amount. I have never seen that amount of money in cash in my life. I have never seen that amount of money ever together once till today with so many years. I can understand how big that amount is. But to have that, if that amount, it is not an unthinkable amount. You would have done a full career in the civil services. I would have done a full career in teaching. We would have, at the end of the day, had at least this much in our PPF for savings accounts. Yes. So my point is, at such a young age, in the larger scheme of things, a relatively small amount at such an entry level would have not happened with with some political contractor bureaucracy nexus. Yes, very very young officers. And this nexus of politics, bureaucracy, and industry is the perfect recipe for larger scandals. And let us be comprehensive enough. There have been cases of religious corruption where religious institutions have been involved in corrupt activities because they are charitable organizations. So they get certain tax exemptions. They deal with a lot of cash contributions as well. You can circle a fair chunk of money because of donations received. So therefore, there is going to be a fundamental flaw in the process. And then there are legal causes. If in a country today, technically, remember we did electoral bonds and I discussed generally how right now, technically, there is no limit on the amount of money a corporate can donate to a political party. And even a foreign company who has a Indian owned 50% subsidiary can also donate. There are no limitations on political party expenses. The laws are fundamentally inadequate. If your Right to Education Act has a privacy clause that if the information does not relate directly to the act of corruption, so we will not disclose it. That is why the Data Protection Act, which changed the RTI, also had a conflict. We will discuss the conflict in when we discuss RTI, right? So, administrative, social, psychological, economic, political, religious, and legal causes. And then, what are the types of corruption? The first is the small scale corruption, petty corruption, which is called grease money or chai pani or mithai in common language. Smaller bribes which are paid to lower level officers to expedite a certain service or to avoid minor penalties. The quantum is not going to be too much. Yes, Chapani. Then you have grand corruption, the exact opposite, where this happens at the highest levels of government, where large sums of money by policy are being siphoned off or being given preferentially, like a 2G spectrum case or a Commonwealth case or it was what was hypothetically a coal allocation scam, which is, if you read, the coal allocation scam has not really been a scam. It has been about what could have, should have, would have happened if we could have done something like that. In fact, the the CG at that time, who was responsible for coming up with the notional loss number, that we lost 1,000 crores, X thousand crores, because we preferentially allotted coal blocks and we didn't auction them. When he later, after retirement, wrote his memoir, or his wrote his memoir, or he wrote his, his work, he said it was a mistake because that was really not tangible losses. So my point is, going forward, mention 2G, mention Commonwealth, but be very careful in how you're writing Colgate scams. These are policy level scams. Then you have what is called systemic, which might sound similar to petty, but it is not. This is also called endemic corruption, which means it's like a disease where the corruption is a part of your political, economic, social ecosystem. In fact, it is largely characterized by, very widespread corrupt activities. Yes, absolutely. And then you have, yeah, like driving license, like getting a document, like changing your address on Aadhaar. Yes. Like asking the banking correspondent to give you your share of money. Then you have professional or amateur corruption. Professional or amateur corruption mean two different things. Professional corruption is a predictable, routine corrupt practice. You'll get stopped at a red light, they will ask you for money, you give them and move on. Right? Amateur corruption is unexpected, it's less predictable. You don't know that even if you've paid the bribe, you will get the service. For example, if you're in jail and you've bribed one of the jail officials to get you a pizza. Now you've paid them 5,000 bucks for a pizza. You usually think you will get one. You went to jail and you said, I want to have cheese bust, farmhouse pizza, cheese bust. So you bribed the jail official and you told the jail official that, listen, I'm going to request you to, uh, you know, give me money, give me a cheese bust pizza. It's not really going to happen, right? Yeah. Yes. It's so petty and amateur is the differences in scale. Petty is just paying 100 bucks for them to process your request, just to move the file. And then there is a larger system of black money, a parallel economy, unaccounted wealth. If the way you're generating wealth is illegal, the wealth that you've generated is also illegal. If somebody's paid you money to get themselves transferred, that money is not an economic activity that you can write in your books of accounts. Yes. Clear? And this black money is a very significant part of our economy, unfortunately. Yes. Fourth is professional, which means predictable routine corrupt practices. Like, for example, you have gone to, claim your pension. You know that they'll not release your pension if you give them some money. Simple as that. It's a routine thing. There can be overlaps. It's not as if they're watertight distinctive. These are just larger ways to look at it. Now, if these are the types, to buy a BMW in civil services is impossible. To buy a BMW in any form of work which is socially to be done is impossible. When I was setting up, most of you know that we have a offline space now. So I used to have a Skoda car and all that. So I sold my cars. I had a Skoda and I had a Jeep. Family parents required one. Because at that time I used to travel to uh, Rajinagar for a lot of classes and I had to go to court and everything. Now I just have to go to court and classes are here in Dwarka. So to secure the initial costs of infrastructure, we've effectively sold both the cars. Now I am a Toyota person, a very sensible uncle who does this. So yeah. Now, if you want to afford a BMW, then you have to make a strategy video every day in our industry about what it is that you have to do and how do you have to do it and all of that. So yeah, yeah. Just on fortune. No, it's not a part. No, no, no. It's a basic car. It's a small car. It's not. Mm. I don't have a masculinity complex that I'll buy a Fortuner, and not that I can afford it, but yeah. Okay. So what are the consequences? No, no, no. I know. I'm just pulling your leg too. The consequences of, also, I'm sorry if I'm a little not energetic enough, is because the weekend has been extremely tough. My father, who's 77 years old, unfortunately is admitted to the ICU in the hospital. So I've come back from the hospital at 8 o'clock. I've just had a 45-minute quick nap and freshened up and everything before class. So if I'm not sounding very energetic, so just give me some time. I'll be back. Don't worry, he's recovering well. He's basically had a bypass history back in the day and has had a very severe UTI infection with sepsis. Um, and the BP was very low to the point that it was 90/40. So we could not take a chance with fluctuating fever and irritable movements digestively. So we moved him to the hospital nearby. So he's fine. So it's just that you know just give me some time. I mean, so the idea is that if I'm not sounding uh, jovial enough today is because there's just a little bit of concern at the back of my head. But I know that you guys are with me, and we'll collectively pray for his happiness as I pray for yours. So let's hope things are going to be okay. Anyway, so now let's look at consequences. So Corruption is not just about money being lost. Corruption is not just about, um, is not just about uh, money gone from point A to point B or money lost and all of those things. Corruption has far reaching consequences. One of the most, of course, the basic ones is that there is an economic consequence. There is, just a second. There is an economic consequence. So, corruption fundamentally leads to the misallocation of resources. It distorts markets, it hinders economic growth, it discourages investment, it increases the cost of doing business, it fundamentally reduces any any you know interest that you would have to make it a business in a country. Very recently, you would have heard of an entrepreneur who recently, so fed up with corruption in the system, said, I'm winding up and I'm moving abroad. It's not that Indians are not capable of running a business, it's just that in India, things are so difficult. So the economic consequences are like these. See, money is finite, money is not infinite, and opportunities are finite, and money is finite. That contract for that specific job, for that specific money, is a defined entity. When somebody is paid more than that, and that job has been given to somebody who should have not gotten it, the job is compromised, money is compromised, and the process is compromised. There are also social consequences to begin with. So this means if you have the means for it, you will be able to achieve more and more. So unfortunately, the cycle of corruption is social inequality breeds corruption, and corruption further enhances social inequality. Social inequality breeds corruption, and social inequality further enhances corruption. It today, why do people have very limited faith in the government or tangible government? Why the bureaucracy is looked at from such a suspicious eye? It is so, nobody says, oh, nobody looks at a collector as the way they look at a maybe a doctor, that and I know a doctor might not also be a very good example because we've seen medical malpractice issues and medical corruption also. But why are you guys not just looked at agents of change? You guys are looked at from a point of view of that you guys have the custody of power. You guys are the ones holding the strings to power. You guys are the masters behind the curtains. Why are you looked at from that perspective? You're never just looked at from a social agent or an agent of social change perspective, right? And baffling enough that, oh, you're going to become the king of a district, or you're going to become, you're going to own things and run things. So it fundamentally undermines the trust in public institutions. There are political consequences. Not only, public institutions, state institutions, but political institutions. Democracy gets fundamentally compromised if votes are being bought. If you could buy voters by giving them something, whether is a freebie could be a form of corruption. That is why there's a, so ethically freebies could be corruption, legally may not be. That's the larger problem with the freebie debate. That legally there's nothing wrong with freebies. Ethically, there is so much more wrong with freebies. And then there are human rights consequences. Corruption directly impacts human rights by denying individuals the right to access institutions like healthcare, like education, like justice. If I could buy my way into AIMS, then persons that would genuinely require AIMS treatments are far behind. And there are environmental consequences, right? Degradation of environment, bypassing environmental laws and regulations, unsustainable practices. So corruption is not unique to India; it is a global issue. In Italy, the Italian mafia you would have heard of, their influence in politics and business has been a long-standing issue. Brazil has had what is called Operation Car Wash, which showed widespread corruption involving top, politicians and business leaders. US had what was called the Watergate scandal, corruption at the highest levels. The idea is corruption is a multifaceted problem. The sooner we understand it, the better it is. Yes, exactly. Are we clear on this? Do we understand this? Is the theory okay? Does the theory make sense? Good. Now, I'll check. So, MCN 70, 71, 72. Please read up. I will add more Monroe Doctrine to Gunroe Doctrine. And MCF3, I'll add this to your portal also by today, so don't worry about it. And prelims concise notes where we've done bodies. So PCN 18. Clear? Anjum, just drop me an email. I'll send them to you in a drive if you're not able to find them. Okay? Are we okay with this? Whatever needs to be added, I'll add up and give you. And by tomorrow evening, at whatever, there are a few MCMA notes I have to give you on political parties, etc. I'm done drafting them. I'll upload them by tomorrow. Okay, good. I'll see you tomorrow morning. There's no change in class schedule, so don't worry. I have not been able to go through. I'll do it by today. I'm so sorry. Yes. हाँ. ये MCM का ही तो और क्या हो रहा है ये अमन. Yes. Thank you, Anjum. Clear? Good. So I'll see you tomorrow. There's no change in class schedule or anything. We'll continue studying. We'll take another day or two to do the policy, right? And then we'll move to good governance, which is citizens charter, e-governance, all of that, and put it all together. So boss sessions, I'll arrange for them. Yes. LSD, I'll be doing a separate lecture. Just give me a day or two, Divyanshu. A separate lecture for both of you guys in different detail. Okay. I'm aware of LSD. Don't worry. Preeti, there is just LSG left. Nothing else is left. Everybody else in MCF3, only local self government is left, right? Everything else we've covered in MCF3, right? Yes. MCF3 will do separately. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Emergency. Okay. Done. Theme 2 complete. In what? Divyanshu, theme 2 of what? Anti-corruption. We just started. We just finished theory. We'll take tomorrow and maybe day after for policy. Okay? Good. Oh, yeah, yeah. Of course, of course. Done. ठीक है. See you tomorrow. Bye bye.